Imipolex G has proved to be nothing more or less sinister than a new plastic, an aromatic heterocyclic polymer developed in 1939, years before its time, by one L. Jampf for IG Farben. It is stable at high temperatures, like up to 900 degrees centigrade. It combines good strength with a low power loss factor. Structurally, it's a stiffened chain of aromatic rings, hexagons like the gold one that slides and taps above Hilary Bounce's navel, alternating here and there with what are known as heterocyclic rings. The origins of Imipolex G are traceable back to early research done at DuPont. Plasticity has its grand tradition and mainstream, which happens to flow by way of DuPont and their famous employee, Carruthers, known as the Great Synthesist. His classic study of large molecules spanned the decade of the 20s and brought us directly to nylon, which not only is a delight to the fetishist and a convenience to the armed insurgent, but was also, at the time and well within the system, an announcement of plasticity's central canon, that chemists were no longer to be at the mercy of nature. They could decide now what properties they wanted a molecule to have, and then go ahead and build it. At DuPont, the next step after nylon was to introduce aromatic rings into the polyamide chain. Pretty soon a whole family of aromatic polymers had arisen. Aromatic polyamides, polycarbonates, polyethers, polysulfanes. The target property most often seemed to be strength. First among plasticity's virtuous triad of strength, stability, and whiteness. Kraft, Standfestigkeit, Weisse. How often these were taken for Nazi graffiti, and indeed how indistinguishable they commonly were on the rain-brightened walls as the buses clashed gears in the next street over, and the trams creaked of metal, and the people were mostly silent in the rain, with the early evening darkened to the texture of smoke from a pipe, and the arms of young passers-by not in the sleeves of their coats, but inside somewhere, as if sheltering midgets, or ecstatically drifted away from the timetable into a tactile affair with linings more seductive even than the new nylon. L. Jampf, among others, then proposed, logically, dialectically, taking the parental polyamide sections of the new chain and looping them around into rings too, giant heterocyclic rings to alternate with the aromatic rings. This principle was easily extended to other precursor molecules. A desired monomer of high molecular weight could be synthesized to order, bent into its heterocyclic ring, clasped, and strung in a chain along with the more natural benzene or aromatic rings. Such chains would be known as aromatic heterocyclic polymers. One hypothetical chain that Jampf came up with just before the war was later modified into Imipolex G. Jampf at the time was working for a Swiss outfit called Psychochemie AG, originally known as the Grössli Chemical Corporation, a spin-off from Sandoz, where, as every schoolchild knows, the legendary Dr. Hoffmann made his important discovery. In the early 20s, Sandoz, Ciba, and Geigy had got together in a Swiss chemical cartel. Shortly after, Jampf's firm was also absorbed. Apparently, most of Grössli's contract had been with Sandoz anyway. As early as 1926, there were real oral agreements between the Swiss cartel and IG Farben. When the Germans set up their cover company in Switzerland, IG Chemie, 2 years later, a majority of the Grössli stock was sold to them, and the company reconstituted as Psychochemie AG. The patent for Imipolex G was thus cross-filed for both the IG and for Psychochemie. Shell Oil got into it through an agreement with Imperial Chemicals dated 1939. For some curious reason, Slothrop will discover no agreements between ICI and the IG seem to be dated any later than 39. In this Imipolex agreement, ICI could market the new plastic inside the Commonwealth in exchange for £1 and other good and valuable consideration. That's nice. Psychochemie AG is still around, still doing business at the same old address in the Schokoladestrasse in that Zurich, Switzerland. Slothrop swings the long keychain of his Zoot in some agitation. A few things are immediately obvious. There is even more being zeroed in on him from out there than he'd thought, even in his most paranoid spells. Imipolex G shows up on a mysterious insulation device on a rocket being fired with the help of a transmitter on the roof of the headquarters of Dutch Shell, who is co-licensee for marketing the Imipolex, a rocket whose propulsion system bears an uncanny resemblance to one developed by British Shell at around the same time. And oh boy, it just occurs to Slothrop now where all the rocket intelligence is being gathered, into the office of who but Mr. Duncan Sands, Churchill's own son-in-law, who works out of the Ministry of Supply, located where but at Shell Mech's house, for Christ's sake. Here Slothrop stages a brilliant commando raid, along with faithful companion Bludget Waxwing, on Shell Mech's house itself, right into the heart of the rocket's own branch office in London. Mowing down platoons of heavy security with his little Sten, kicking aside nubile and screaming rack secretaries, how else is there to react even in play, savagely looting files, throwing Molotov cocktails, the zoot-suit zanies at last crashing into the final sanctum with their trousers up around their armpits, smelling singed hair, spilled blood, to find not Mr. Duncan Sands cowering before their righteousness, nor open window, gypsy flight, scattered fortune cards, nor even a test of wills with the great consortium itself, but only a rather dull room, business machines arrayed around the walls calmly blinking, files of cards pierced frail as sugar faces, frail as the last German walls, standing without support after the bombs have been and now twisting high above, threatening to fold down out of the sky from the force of the wind that has blown the smoke away. The smell of firearms is in the air, and there's not an office dame in sight. The machines chatter and ring to each other. It's time to snap down your brims, share a post-violence cigarette, and think about escape. Do you remember the way in, all the twists and turns? No, you weren't looking. Any of these doors might open you to safety, but there may not be time. But Duncan Sands is only a name, a function in this how high does it go is not even the right kind of question to be asking, because the organization charts have all been set up by them, the titles and names filled in by them, because Proverbs for Paranoids 3. If they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about answers. Slothrop finds he has paused in front of the blue parts list that started all this. How high does it go? Ah. The treacherous question is not meant to apply to people, after all, but to the hardware. Squinting, moving a finger carefully down the column, Slothrop finds that Vorrichtung für die Isolierungsnext Higher Assembly. S-Gerät 11/00000. If this number is the serial number of a rocket, as its form indicates, it must be a special model. Slothrop hasn't even heard of any with 4 zeros, let alone 5, nor an S-Gerät either. There's an I- and a J-Gerät there in the guidance. Well, document SG-1, which isn't supposed to exist, must cover that.